Good evening and welcome to another The Wombles of Boom tutorial. Today we're going to focus on docking without RCS this time. And there are two main ways to do this. One is manual, which we're going to show later, and the other way is the now renowned Lowne Lazy Method, which makes use of this target indicator and our SAS. In between the two, we're also going to show some of the physics that are going on that make docking, certainly when you're starting out, and certainly it was for me, would make docking so hard and unfathomable and frustrating. It's to do with differences in orbit, but we'll get to that shortly. My craft are also super maneuverable. They were designed just for this. Your craft are going to be much more practical. Mine is basically useless in the game. Yours will have crew modules, science modules, all that sort of jazz, and as a result it'll react more slowly. It won't be as maneuverable and as easy to point in whatever direction you want. That's not a problem. All I'm trying to show here is the physics. You will need to do things a little bit slower. You'll need to plan. I've made this maneuver. How do I cancel the speed? I need to rotate and turn and prepare for it a little sooner. But that comes with practice. Hopefully here I'm going to share the concepts and the principles with you. So let's get into it. First things first, and this is going to be a theme, and as you go through this tutorial it will become apparent, hopefully, why this is so important. But to start our maneuvers, I'm going to just cancel our relative velocities. I want us moving at 0 meters per second relative to each other. Let's just correct that. Right. I'm going to hold control, so the throttle always wants to throttle down, and then just tap shift. What that means is as soon as I let go shift, the control key forces the velocity, the throttle, down to 0, so you can make really, really fine changes. Okay, we're at 0 meters per second. I have already double-clicked the target, the docking port of the other craft. That means that is my target, the docking port. So let's just tell SAS to point us at him. And you'll notice that even though I zeroed it, just before I did that rotation, I already had some sort of movement. We'll cover that in a moment. Let's flick to the other craft. I also had him set the docking port of our first craft as a target a while ago, so it was all ready for when I started. SAS, let's point towards the target. Righty-ho. So let's get back to this relative velocity. What's happened? Where has it come from? Why, when I cancelled it all, have we now got some sort of other movement going on? Our orbits look basically the same. And that's the trick. They're not. We have some sort of distance. There is, as much as it looks the same in the map view, there is a difference in the orbit. And if you've got different orbits, it means that your craft are moving around the planet at different speeds. And in this case, the speed is in some sort of direction this way, it seems, because that's retrograde, so prograde is going to be somewhere there. Our speed is in some sort of distance out here relative to each other, and as we move around our orbits, our relative speeds are changing. And what this means is we're going to have some sort of movement that we didn't add or we didn't want in the system, but it's there anyway, which is going to mess us up when we try and burn towards the target. Now normally, just before I burned, I would cancel velocity once more, and then I'd burn towards him. But these craft are super maneuverable, they just want to dock. I want to exaggerate some of what's happening, and you may recognize it from what you see when you dock your craft. Nope, it's already up to 0.3, so let's get moving. Both craft are pointing at each other. Both craft will keep pointing at each other because I've told them to, so let's go. Burning towards the target, and I'm going to give myself a total of a little bit more than 1 meter per second. Okay, and although I burned straight at the target, I was straight at the target, my motion isn't towards the target. My motion is actually, the prograde means this is my motion relative to the target. My motion is off to the right of it somewhere, and that's because we had that other movement already. If you combine movement in one direction with movement in a different direction, you get an average final movement that's somewhere between the two. And that's what this is showing. Now, although it's exaggerated at this point, when you're moving close to the target, if you start from 0 and you burn towards it, this prograde marker is probably going to be a lot closer to the target marker, but you'll start noticing, wow, I'm 50 meters out, it's starting to slide away. The natural tendency is burn more towards the target. That'll help. And I know it looks stupid at this point because it's exaggerated, but essentially it's harder to detect this exaggerated problem. And I burned towards the target, which seemed to help, but it didn't. Oh, now I'm going 5 meters per second. Oh dear, let's try and correct that. I'm going to try and go towards the target before I go too far away. And every time I'm burning towards the target, my prograde marker never comes onto the target. And that's because I've got this sideways velocity. And now because I'm adding speed into the whole system, my overall speed, my overall sideways velocity just never gets less, and they just keep spinning past each other. And as you've noticed, my movement to try and solve all of this becomes faster and faster and faster and more problematic. And we start really whipping past each other, and it gets a bit dangerous if you've got large craft. These little guys can whip past each other really easily. But if you're in a much bigger craft, you're going to be starting to look at smashing. Let's just cancel the velocity. You're going to be looking at starting to smash solar panels and fueling modules and science modules and all that sort of thing. You're going to start hitting stuff. So although mine was exaggerated, this is what's happening. As you burn towards the craft, tiny little differences of your pro and retrograde marker, or your prograde marker, mean that when you try and burn more towards the target, you're simply adding speed, but you're never bringing the prograde marker onto the target. So, what do you need to do? Burn towards the other guy. And with my craft, I've got lots of maneuverability and lots of time. And at this point, I might not need to do a correction because these two craft really do like docking. But I'm going to do it anyway. When we're closer, well before we're closer, I'm going to prepare to cancel out all of our relative velocity. Below 1 meter per second, these markers don't show up. So I'm just going to do that manually. But when we're about 20 meters apart, and you'll see we are still missing, we're heading off to the left here. When we're about 20 meters apart, I will cancel our relative velocity. Control, tap, 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 shift. Now I'll do Lowne Lazy again. Point towards the target. Now I should be able to do this final burn, and we're so close now that there shouldn't be a big deal. Any offset we've got of some sort of funny sideways movement is not enough at this sort of range to have much of an impact. And the two SAS modules keep us pointed together enough that we dock smoothly. Whereas in my previous example, we were coming past too far away. Although we kept pointing at the other craft, it didn't help. We were too far away. So hopefully that has given you some insights already as to what's going on. If you are docking and you're a little bit further away, certainly burn towards the other craft. But before it gets insane, before you start dodging and dancing and moving past him, turn retrograde, cancel your speed, then turn back towards the target again and reburn. And you may need to do that multiple times. Just remember, before you cancel, you're going to need to know you've got enough distance and time to spin your craft around so that you can do those cancellations before you hit something. These guys are super maneuverable. That makes it nice and easy for me. You'll just need to plan that a little bit ahead. Right? So you essentially end up orbiting the other guy, and because your orbits around Kerbin is different, you get some sort of different velocity which you didn't intend and you didn't add to the system. But by burning straight towards the target, you're never quite solving that problem, and it just adds more energy into the entire thing, and you end up spinning around each other. Okay. Let's now do manual. And I'm going to do two things quickly. First things first. There is a way. I showed how the prograde marker never quite, if you burn straight at the target, let's just do that quickly. We're 60 meters away. So the prograde marker, if you're burning straight at the target, the prograde marker comes closer, but it never actually gets to that pink mark. And that's because it's always an addition of, I'm burning this way, there's some velocity that way. Adding the two together, the new burn plus the existing speed, gives us something in between. Never something exactly on it, it's always something in between. You can get super close, but never right onto it. However, what you can do is, remember I said the resultant direction is always somewhere in between. So if my prograde direction is that way, and I burn up here, the resultant end velocity is going to be in between. Let's do that. There we go. And I can correct it even more. Control tap, 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 shift, tap, 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 shift. Look at that. Now my ultimate velocity is directly at the other craft. I'm going to hit it from the side though, so let's just cancel that out. Okay. But hopefully that made sense. If I've got some sort of velocity in a prograde direction of this, I'm off to the side, or I'm off to the side anywhere. If I want to get that direction on here, I have to add more velocity off to the other side. And the two bits of movement together add up in speed. The speed increases very rapidly, but your direction is basically somewhere in between. Just a quick throwaway, we're not going to go into this in great detail. If you end up going retrograde, because you're doing things in the opposite direction, everything is basically backward. If your retrograde marker is here, and you want to go retrograde towards the target, or retrograde, you want your retrograde marker on the target, you actually have to go more off to the side. You're essentially pushing the retrograde marker. The prograde marker, you're pulling onto the target. So if it's out here, you burn there and you pull it onto the target. Right, finally, let's do a manual docking. I'm going to treat this like a space station. We can't just willy-nilly rotate space stations all over the place. They've got lots of stuff attached that'll break. There's our docking port. We need this craft somewhere in front of it so that we can point right at him. So let's do that. He's going to have to do all the movement. Our space station gets to stay dead still. Right, if I burn now, I'm going to go straight at him, so that's a terrible idea. So let's do that. And let's see what this gets us. Right, let's go retrograde. I'm going to allow myself to use these because most scientists, most cores that you might have even at the lower tech levels should be able to hold pro and retrograde. I won't do it all the time, but I will try and use it a bit because it's just a bit more quick, just a bit quicker. Right, I haven't gone quite far enough. Let's do this. Let's go cancel that out. Well, in a moment, let's cancel that out. That's not going to be too bad. This is where you have to eyeball it. There is not a single marker anywhere that will be able to tell you how to aim at the point in front of this. I've had to just eyeball it, guess, and then make those maneuvers. I'm also doing it really close to the other guy, because I can, because he is a tiny craft. you're going to want to, if you're actually trying to dock with a real space station that you've put up there, or another craft that's super big, or your craft has got bits off it, you're going to want to do this maneuvering quite a lot further away. Otherwise you will be smacking stuff into each other. But notice I've cancelled relative velocity. Do things simply. Do things one step at a time. Go, I think this is the direction. At some point go, yep, that was good, but not quite right. Cancel it, and then do your next burn. I've done 2 or 3 to get to this point directly in front. And now I've zeroed my speed. So that hopefully, half a meter per second, so that hopefully we're going to dock safely. Okay. But that's the trick. Remember, the orbits that you're on will give you some sort of relative velocity. That's going to mess up your nicely laid plan of burning to the target, but you can deal with it. When you get closer, cancel velocity, and then reburn towards the target. And whether you're doing this automatically using these nodes, or whether you are manually rotating your craft towards prograde or retrograde or towards the target, the theory is still the same. Cancel velocity, then burn towards target, then cancel velocity, burn towards target, until you're close enough that your final burn is nice and simple and you don't miss. And make maneuvers, plan your maneuvers, and if you are needing to line yourself up with a docking port, make sure you're doing your maneuvers well away from the target you're aiming at, because invariably you'll have more stuff to break than I do. I hope that has helped. Happy practicing, happy docking, and we'll catch you in another tutorial. Ciao.